Missouri Ridge, 1895. A place where the sky stretched forever and the hills rolled like sleeping giants. The air smelled of cedar and rain, and every sound seemed to echo from the ridge to the river below. At the heart of the town stood a small white church, its steeple reaching for heaven, its paint peeling from years of sun and prayer. It wasn't grand, but it was sacred to those who came. Farmers, widows, children in hand-me-down shoes, all gathering every Sunday to hear the word from the one man they trusted with their souls. That man was Reverend Josiah Crane. Tall, solemn, and always in black, he carried an air of quiet authority, not the kind that came from pride, but from pain. He preached softly, never shouting, yet every word seemed to echo in people's hearts long after the bell stopped ringing. But behind his gentle voice lay something unspoken. Those who looked closely could see it, the heaviness in his eyes, the way he lingered by the river after each baptism as if waiting for something or someone. Missouri Ridge loved him, but few truly knew him. And fewer still dared to ask what shadows lay behind that faithful man of God. Reverend Crane had come to Missouri Ridge 5 years earlier. No one knew much about him, only that he arrived on a mule with one suitcase, one Bible, and a letter of recommendation from a church far away. When the townsfolk asked where he came from, he simply said, "South." And when they asked why he came, he smiled faintly and replied, "Because the Lord told me there was work to be done here." He rebuilt the old church himself, hammering boards, repainting walls, fixing pews. Children watched him from a distance, whispering stories. Some said he was a war chaplain. Others said he'd lost his family. Whatever the truth, the preacher never denied or confirmed it. But every night after the town slept, a light could be seen down by the river. Josiah would sit alone beneath the moon, Bible open, murmuring prayers into the wind, prayers no one could hear, and perhaps prayers not even meant for God. When Reverend Crane baptized, it was unlike anything the town had seen before. He would wade into the water slowly, his black sleeves rolled to his elbows, his voice barely above the sound of the current. "The river remembers," he'd whisper. "It remembers the sins washed away, and the souls that pass through it." Then he'd lift the child or man or woman gently into the water, let the light dance over their faces and say, "Washed clean in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." Rye's new and unbroken people said it wasn't just baptism, it felt like rebirth. Afterward, Crane would stand still in the river, looking downstream long after everyone had left. Some thought he was thanking the Lord, but others wondered if he was searching the current for something lost long ago. Among the congregation was Martha Hensley, a widow who worked as a seamstress. Her husband had died in a mining accident, leaving her alone with a frail, bright-eyed boy named Eli. Eli was 10 but small for his age. His chest wheezed when he breathed, and his cough echoed through their small cabin at night. Still, he was cheerful, always asking questions about heaven, angels, and the stars. Reverend Crane took a liking to him. He often brought soup when the boy was ill, or chopped wood for the widow when winter came early. He'd sit by Eli's bedside reading Psalms, his voice soft and steady. Eli would listen wide-eyed, sometimes interrupting. "Reverend, do you think heaven has rivers too?" Crane would smile sadly. "Yes, Eli. A river that never runs dry," the boy would grin. "Then I hope I can swim there someday." The Reverend's smile always faded just a little at that. In small towns, even kindness can turn into gossip. Mr. Gage, the blacksmith, was the first to mutter suspicions. "That preacher's too quiet for my liking," he'd say over ale at the tavern. "Seen him by the river one night. Thought maybe he was praying, but it looked like he was baptizing something that wasn't there." Some laughed, but others frowned. A few women crossed themselves and whispered, "Maybe he's haunted." Within weeks, the talk grew darker. Children dared each other to go to the river after sundown. And though Reverend Crane never spoke of the whispers, his eyes grew heavier, as if he heard them all the same. One autumn night, thunder cracked over the ridge. Rain came down in fierce sheets, flooding the dirt roads and filling the riverbanks. From her window, Martha Hensley saw a lantern flickering near the church. Through the storm, a dark figure moved, tall, deliberate, heading toward the river. Her heart sank when she recognized the gate. It was Reverend Crane. Driven by a mix of worry and curiosity, she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and followed. Her boots sank into the mud, the wind clawing at her hair. When she reached the water's edge, she froze. There, in the lightning's flash, she saw the preacher kneeling in the shallows, his lantern beside him, his hands holding a small wooden cross. He was weeping, and his words, barely audible through the thunder, chilled her to the bone. "Forgive her, Lord. She deserved peace, not my failure. Let her rest where your water flows." Martha watched, breath held, as Crane dipped the cross into the rushing river and lifted it toward the heavens. Lightning lit his face, lined, wet with tears, haunted by some unseen memory. Then, softly, almost brokenly, he said, "I baptize you again, my love. Once for life, and once for what came after Martha's breath caught." He wasn't praying for the living. He was baptizing the dead. Terrified and heartbroken for him both, she turned back through the rain. That night, she lay awake until dawn, the image of that lonely preacher by the river burning in her mind. The next morning, Martha couldn't keep it inside. She went to the church after service. "Reverend," she began softly, "I saw you at the river last night. Who were you praying for?" He froze, his hands tightening around his Bible. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his shoulders sank, and his voice came low and weary. "Sometimes, Mrs. Hensley, I baptize those I couldn't save. The living forget the dead too soon. But I can't." Martha's heart ached. "You mean someone you loved?" He closed his eyes. "A wife, a daughter, both lost in a flood. I found them downstream. I baptized them there, thinking maybe God would still take them clean." His voice broke. "I've done it ever since. When the pain returns, not for them now, but for me, for the guilt that never left." Martha left the church trembling, both sorrowful and deeply moved. For the first time, she understood the loneliness behind his faith. A few weeks later, a gray-bearded traveler came through town, a man named Aaron Pike. He carried an old soldier's air and a weary heart. When he heard the name Josiah Crane, his face went pale. "Crane? I knew that man down in Mississippi," he said. "He was a preacher there, had a wife named Abigail and a baby girl. They drowned in a flood that swallowed half the county. Folks said he went mad with grief, tried to baptize their bodies in the river, thinking it would bring them peace." The townsfolk stared in stunned silence. "Left that place soon after," the traveler added. "Said he'd never preach again. Guess he changed his mind." By sunset, every porch and parlor in Missouri Ridge buzzed with the tale. And though some pitied the preacher, others whispered he'd brought ghosts with him from the South. Winter came early that year. The hills turned white, and the river froze along its edges. Eli's cough grew worse, his small body shaking with every breath. Martha prayed day and night, her fingers raw from clutching her rosary. Reverend Crane visited daily, sitting beside Eli's bed, reading softly from the book of John. One night, as the oil lamp flickered low, Eli reached for the preacher's hand. "Reverend," he whispered, "do you think if I get baptized again, maybe God will make me better?" Crane's voice faltered. "You've already been baptized, Eli." The Lord knows your name." The boy smiled weakly. "Then maybe he'll remember me better if the river does too." The preacher's eyes filled with tears. "You're already remembered, son." But Eli just smiled, his voice no louder than the wind outside. "Please, Reverend." One more time. Before spring comes, Crane looked toward the window, the faint moonlight on the frozen river, and knew what he had to do. The morning broke pale and cold, the river rimmed with a thin film of ice. Reverend Crane carried Eli in his arms, wrapped in a wool blanket. Martha followed close behind, her face pale, her steps trembling in the snow. The air was still. The only sound was the slow crunch of their boots and the boy's soft breathing against the preacher's chest. When they reached the water's edge, Crane knelt, whispering a prayer that shook with both faith and fear. "Lord, grant this child your peace. Let him feel your light, not in pain, but in love." He waded into the freezing water, holding Eli gently as the current rippled around them. The boy looked up, eyes half closed. "It's so cold," he murmured. "I know, son," Crane whispered, tears freezing on his cheeks. "But it will be warm soon. Just trust me." Then, slowly, carefully, he lowered Eli into the water. "Eli Hensley, I baptize you in the name of love that never dies." When he lifted him again, the boy's lips curved in a faint smile. "It's warm now, Reverend," he whispered. And then, before Crane could say another word, Eli's body went still in his arms. Martha's cry tore through the trees. Crane sank to his knees in the river, holding the small body close, his sobs echoing across the valley. By midday, the entire town knew. "The preacher took that sick boy to the river in the dead of winter," one man shouted. "Drowned him, I tell you." "Madness," another hissed. "He's cursed. He baptizes the dead, now the living too." Grief twisted into anger. People who once sat in the front pew now turned their backs. The blacksmith, Mr. Gage, led the voices of outrage. "If the law won't run him out, we will." Crane did not defend himself. He sat inside the empty church all night, the boy's small blanket folded in his lap, the baptismal bowl before him, dry and gleaming. When Martha came the next day, her eyes were red, her voice raw. "I know you loved him," she whispered. "But why, Reverend? Why did you take him there?" Crane looked up slowly. "Because he asked me to. And I couldn't deny him heaven's peace any longer." Her tears fell silently onto the church floor. "The river's taken enough from you," she said. He looked toward the window where sunlight glimmered on the distant water. "No, Martha. The river's all I have left by dusk." A mob gathered outside the church, torches in hand. "Leave this town," a man shouted. "We don't need no ghost preacher." Someone threw a stone through the church window. The glass shattered, scattering across the pews like frozen tears. Inside, Reverend Crane stood motionless. He made no defense, no plea. Only one person came to him, Martha Hensley. She stepped through the broken doorway, her face streaked with tears and soot. "I don't believe you meant harm," she said softly. "But you can't stay. They'll never forgive you." He nodded, eyes hollow. Nor should they. Before dawn, he packed his few belongings, his Bible, a wooden cross, and Eli's blanket. He walked down to the river one last time, placed a single white lily on the water, and whispered, "May the river carry you home, little one." Then he left Missouri Ridge, his figure disappearing down the dusty road as the morning mist rose behind him. The seasons came and went. The river ran quieter now, its banks overgrown with reeds. Missouri Ridge carried on, though the church stood mostly empty. Some said they could still hear singing near the river at dusk. A man's voice low and sorrowful, followed by the laughter of a child. Martha grew older, her hair streaked with silver. She kept Eli's grave tidy and left fresh wildflowers every Sunday. And each spring, when the river swelled with meltwater, she'd kneel by its edge and whisper, "He's with you now, Reverend." Both of you are years turned into a decade. The world moved forward, but the memory of the preacher who baptized twice, once in hope, once in farewell, never quite faded from the ridge. It was 10 years later when a stranger appeared at the edge of town, old, frail, and leaning heavily on a cane. His clothes were worn, his hair white as snow. He walked with a limp, but his eyes still carried that same quiet fire. It took the townsfolk a moment to recognize him. "Reverend Crane?" someone gasped. "But we thought you were long gone." He smiled faintly. "I was," he said simply. He found the church boarded up, dust thick on the pews. The pulpit stood as he had left it, his old Bible still resting there, pages yellowed but unturned. He cleaned it slowly, his trembling hands tracing the words he had once preached. "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Then with a sigh, he turned toward the river once more. It had always been waiting for him. That afternoon, as he prayed by the riverbank, he heard laughter, bright and familiar. Turning, he saw a young girl watching him from the trees. She couldn't have been more than 10. "Are you the preacher?" she asked shyly. "I was," Crane said, with a gentle smile. "Long ago." She stepped closer, curious. "Mama says you're the man who baptized people twice." Crane's heart skipped. "Who is your mama, child?" "Martha Hensley," she said proudly. "I'm Lydia." "Eli was my brother. Mama told me you were his friend." The preacher's breath caught. For a moment, the years fell away, and he saw in her face the faint, sweet echo of the boy he once held in his arms. "I knew your brother well," he said softly. "He was brave." Kinder than most grown men, Lydia smiled. "Mama says you helped him find heaven." Tears welled in Crane's eyes, though he hid them behind a trembling smile. "No, child," he said gently. "He helped me find it." The next morning, Lydia found him again by the river, his hands resting on the wooden cross. "Will you baptize me too, Reverend?" she asked innocently. "Mama says it's a blessing." Crane hesitated. "It's not just a blessing, child. It's a promise, a way to start new, to walk in light even when the world grows dark." "I want that," she said eagerly. So, with careful hands, the old preacher guided her into the shallow water. The sun shone bright, scattering gold across the surface. As he placed his hand on her head, he whispered, "Lydia Hensley, child of grace, I baptize you in the name of life everlasting, for all that was lost and all that's yet to be found." When she rose, laughing, water glistening on her face, Crane smiled for the first time in years, not with sorrow, but with peace. That night, he wrote in his journal, "Today, the river gave me back what it once took, hope." As evening fell, the air turned quiet. Fireflies shimmered above the water like tiny lanterns. Reverend Crane sat on the same spot he had once wept over Eli. His Bible lay open beside him, but his gaze was fixed on the river. When Martha came to find him, she saw him sitting peacefully, his face calm, his hands folded in his lap. "Josiah?" she whispered. He didn't stir. She touched his shoulder and realized he was gone. Beside him lay a note, written in a shaky but steady hand. "The river no longer frightens me. I go to finish my baptism, not of the body, but of the soul. Tell Lydia the water is warm." Martha fell to her knees, tears streaming silently. She looked out over the river and whispered, "Rest now, Reverend. You're home." They buried him beside the river, near Eli's grave. The town, once cruel in its judgment, came together in quiet reverence. Even Mr. Gage bowed his head at the funeral, murmuring, He was a better man than I gave him credit for. After that day, strange stories began to spread. Some nights, when the moon was high and the water still, travelers swore they saw two figures standing in the shallows, one tall, one small, bathed in silver light. Others said the river itself sang faint hymns when the wind blew from the south. Whatever the truth, people stopped fearing the place. They called it the Baptism Bend, a spot where love and forgiveness met the current, and sorrow was finally washed clean. Years later, Lydia grew into a young woman. She took over the old church, reopening its doors to anyone who needed grace. On the wall behind the pulpit hung a framed verse, written in Reverend Crane's own hand. We are baptized not once, but twice, first by water, then by mercy. Every Sunday when she preached, she told the story of the man who baptized her, the one who believed that love should bless us on both sides of life. And when her children asked, "Mama, did the preacher really baptize the dead?" she would smile gently and say, "No, my dear. He baptized the broken, those who needed one last touch of light before they could rest." And as the wind blew through Missouri Ridge, the sound of the river could still be heard, whispering through time, carrying with it the memory of a man who turned sorrow into salvation. The preacher who baptized people twice, once alive, once not, and found, at last, his peace.